welcome to my 7th update as Dunleary Rathdown Musician in Residence. What I played just there was a basic kind of imitation of a kind of Congolese rumba guitar style, and the reason I played that is because that kind of style has influenced some of the music I'm composing for the residency at the moment. And if you just break down what I just did there. That basic chord progression there is C to G to F to G is a similar chord progression to what I'm using at the start of the piece, which is like basically and the rhythm is the same. It's a rumba rhythm. The kind of bits I was adding over it. They're in the interval known as a sixth in music theory. An E to a C is the first one. And that kind of style is very characteristic of a man called Franco, who was one of the greatest musicians ever to come out of Africa, and he led a band called OK Jazz, TP Jazz, in the Congo from the late 50s up until his death in 1989 or 1990. That's when he passed away, and recorded something like 300 albums, and Franco wrote about 1,000 songs apparently. But he was they called him the sorcerer of the guitar. And that was a real characteristic of his style, was to play solos in sixths. That kind of a basic idea. And but before Franco, there was a guy called John Bosco Mwenda, who probably pioneered a lot of and influenced a lot of Congolese and musicians across Africa with a finger picking style, and here's a part of a piece of his called Masanga. Quite a complex style of finger picking. You hear maybe 3 different things at once there. A bass line, you know. And then you'd hear lead line, and then in the middle of it something like that, and then towards the end he had this repeating kind of high note. So that's quite a good example of how complex some of this music can be from the Congo. And in the piece I'm composing, I'm taking some ideas, borrowing some ideas from Congolese guitar styles. Like there's a bit towards the end of the piece where I'm doing this. So that's all in sixths and up quite high. You get quite a joyous sound, and around that there's all sorts of other kind of guitar parts happening, and the harmonies are like. So like this style has influenced me a lot over the years. There's a few other pieces kind of where I mix kind of ideas from Congolese guitar styles with kind of classical ideas or Irish traditional ideas, and one of the pieces is called Joy, which I composed for the Crash Ensemble, and Noel Tumbu is a brilliant guitarist from the Congo who lives in Ireland, and Noel and I played it with the Crash Ensemble, and it was kind of, I wrote it especially for Noel's style. He's an amazing guitar player. He can play any kind of style of music, and he plays flamenco and jazz as well as Congolese styles and other styles from Africa, and so that's a piece that's worth having a listen to if you can find it, Joy. And Noel also joined me in my group DFF, and an example of how we collaborated together is like I came up with this very Franco influence kind of that kind of thing, and then in the studio Noel brought a melody a bit like this to it. So that's a little bit about Congolese guitar. There's another bit in the piece I'm writing that has that kind of. So I've two bits that are in harmony. Like I mentioned last week, there was a bit with kind of influenced by trad guitar, where it's like. So there's a kind of a call and response between that Irish idea and the Congolese idea. So it's a. The two lines together are something like this. That kind of a vibe. So that is part of the piece that I'm composing, influenced by Congolese guitar. I'll talk about a few other styles I've learnt a bit about that are from Africa. There's from Zimbabwe. There's Chimurenga music, and the pioneer of that is a great musician called Thomas Mapfumo, and he worked with at the beginning when he was working out this style in the 70s. He was working with a guitarist called Jonah Sitole, and they came up with this kind of guitar style, which is like this. That's kind of a rough version of it, and what that is, it's an imitation of the mbira, which is a Zimbabwean traditional instrument, which is they call it a thumb piano in the West, but played with your thumbs and made out of the ends of spoons, or the kind of the handles of spoons attached to wood, and then there's some bottle tops to give it a kind of a buzzy sound. So that's where that was influenced to get that sound. And I have a piece I composed called Chimurenga for a guitar quartet, which the Dublin Guitar Quartet have recorded, and that's all in that kind of a style. Like there's a kind of a bit like this in one of the parts. And over that there's kind of a so that's all inspired by Zimbabwean chimarenga music. And oh yeah, another thing about that music is the bass lines are really important. So like this is kind of my version of a chimarenga bass line. A bit about chimarenga music from Zimbabwe. Then another style I like a lot that I've been influenced by is from Mali, kind of music of the griot, who kind of are like a ancient royal tribe of musicians from places like Mali and other countries around the area. And a lot of their music is based on the sound and the tradition of an instrument called a kora. And when I play in that kind of style, I sometimes tune the E string up to an F, because a lot of kora music that's kind of the natural tuning. And a kora is something like when you see a kora musician playing, they hold it a bit like this. There's a big gourd, and then there's strings that are plucked with two fingers like this. There's an amazing musician called Tumani Diabate, who is kind of the king of kora music in the modern era, and he comes from a line going back hundreds and hundreds of years of musicians who play the kora. So how a kora piece might open, and then if we go. And so when that's translated to the guitar, that kind of style, like one of the kind of most famous musicians playing guitar was the late Ali Farka Touré, and his music was kind of labelled as desert blues. And very rough idea of that kind of guitar playing. And there's another great band called the Super Rail Band, and their guitarist Jamaladi Tunkura, fantastic guitarist. Rough idea of the kind of thing he might do. And the rail band they were first called the Rail Band in the 70s, and they had a man called Salif Keita as their lead singer, and he's a real superstar in African music, and another person well worth checking out. And I've been influenced by Malian music quite a lot over the years. There's a piece myself and Kieran Swift put together with the banjo player Mick Dunn called The Tempest in Mali, where we mixed ideas from Mali with some Irish jigs and reels, and there's a bit in it where I go and that happens when there's a tune. Another style that's quite influential and important is Township Jive from South Africa, and that's quite famous because Paul Simon was influenced by that when making his Graceland album, and he worked with some Township Jive musicians, and so an example, some of the often the bass is really important and the fundamental kind of root of it, and it's kind of be like this. And then there are chords. So those chords there, they're kind of with the sixth in it, a C with a sixth in it, an F with a sixth, and a G, F. So, but often then there'd be a lead guitarist who might be doing something on, you know. And then another kind of South African style that I heard, there's an album called The Indestructible Beat of Sorrento, which was a big album in the 80s, and I got that maybe in the 90s. I might have got a copy of it, and there's a style there quite different but also from South Africa. Kind of a version of that kind of way of playing, and there's just this kind of repeating mantra going up in the high notes, and then so that's some things about guitar music from Africa that I've learnt. There's loads of other kind of styles. It's a huge continent with lots of different music styles all over the place. So I've only myself scratched the surface of what's there. And on my blog, daveflynn.com, and just go into the blog there, you'll see I've written about some of the music here, and a few playlists up there. And I go into much more detail on the blog, and you can hear different styles, different players, and also like there's bits about music from Kenya, Tanzania, and another style which I didn't mention yet, but I'm going to go into it a bit more in a couple of weeks, is Afrobeat, Afro-funk, which Fela Kuti is the most famous kind of pioneer of the sound. I'm not doing it this week because it's more like a funk guitar style than this kind of styles I've been going into now, and influenced by James Brown And so like I'm going to do a thing in a few weeks about funk guitar and those kind of styles, so I'm going to add that in there. But so that's my update.